Good evening. It's a pleasure to see all of you here today, despite the rain and the festivals which are going on. So, welcome to CIC. And today's speaker is not a stranger to the CIC. She has been here several times before, but it's a pleasure to welcome her again and introduce her to you, Sujatha Shankar. She is an architect by profession with a deep passion for heritage. She has directed two documentary films on Madras or Chennai and designed a heritage map of the city. She graduated with a B. Arch from the School of Architecture and Planning, Madras University, and an M. Arch from the University of Minnesota. In a practice spanning 4 decades since the 1980s, she has been handling projects in architecture, planning, and interior design of diverse typologies and scales. She won a prestigious National Award for Excellence in Design. The book, Women Architects and Modernism in India by Madhavi Desai, includes Sujatha among 28 contemporary practitioners in the country. In a multidimensional career path, she was there's more to come. She was a correspondent for Architecture Plus Design, external faculty in several colleges of architecture, member board of studies at Anna University. She has been written about in publications including India Today and Construction World. Straddling both the worlds of architecture and heritage, she has served as vice chairman of the Indian Institute of Architects Chennai Centre, member of the executive committee of the Tamil Nadu chapter and of the Heritage Conservation Committee constituted by the CMDA. Currently, she is a member of the governing council and executive committee of INTACH, Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, and convener of INTACH, Chennai chapter. She has co-authored a book, Madras Inked, which incidentally was also featured here at the CIC. Impressions of an Artist and an Architect with artist Manohar Devadas. For those of you who haven't seen that book, I think it's a marvelous book, especially the author. Both of them are tremendous, actually. She has been documenting Art Deco of Madras for a decade now and will speak on this style of architecture in Madras today. Give Sujatha Shankar a big hand. I have pleasure in welcoming her to speak to us today. Thank you.
Good evening and happy Janmashtami to all of you. We didn't quite realize when we fixed the date today that it was Krishna Jayanti, but all the same, thank you all for taking the trouble of coming despite having the festival at home. Is it okay if I sit down? Thanks to CIC for having me here this evening to speak about Art Deco in Madras. I wish to remember and dedicate this evening to Mrs. Tara Murli, who spent a lifetime addressing issues of heritage and other causes, and with whom I started this journey of documenting Art Deco. Miss her tremendously. Art Deco, an extraordinary design movement with a new design vocabulary, came to be at the International Exposition in Paris in 1925. And we are here now in 2025, a full 100 years later, to celebrate that iconic moment and what it means for us in Madras as our city welcomed and happily adopted Art Deco. Art Deco spread like a rage worldwide, but was so short lived that it escapes attention. Many people living and working in those buildings hardly even realize that they are in such special design statements. In Europe in the early 1900s, Art Nouveau, an elaborate style with ornamentation, prevailed. Belgium is especially well known for it. France, Germany, Switzerland, and other countries also adopted it. Later, stripping itself of ornamentation, Art Deco movement came in and lasted from the 1920s to the 1940s, literally between the world wars. Miami is very well known for this style. In India, it arrived a wee bit later and therefore also lasted a little longer, till about the 50s, I would say. Bombay has a UNESCO listed Art Deco district, and Madras has a fantastic rendering of the style. Art Deco is extraordinary in the way it transformed design, not only in architecture, but in dress, music, furniture, interiors, objects of everyday use, crockery, cutlery, etc. Today, we will examine Art Deco in Madras. Madras has a myriad architectural styles, as you're all familiar with. And in this rich tapestry, multiple styles coexist. Where in this timeline of our city is Art Deco? Just to give context, here's an overview of how the city's architecture evolved. We had fishing settlements, little village clusters, then we had temples, we had agraharams around the temples, around the temple tanks, in dense urban settlements. And then came foreign visitors, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and the British. And they brought with them the colonial motif. And most of our structures of the 1800s were all colonial. Then, of course, came the amalgam of styles, where the Hindu, the Islamic, the Moorish, the Buddhist, Gothic, European, what have you, all of it melded together and formed the Indo Saracenic that we're all familiar with. And the major presidencies of that era came to be known as colonial Calcutta, Gothic Bombay, and Indo Saracenic Madras. The wealth of Art Deco in our city is quite fascinating. Madras, like the rest of the world, embraced Art Deco, which was to become a dramatic harbinger to the later styles of modernism and the international style that followed. When BBC headquarters was inaugurated in London in 1932, Architectural Review wrote that it parted the road like a battleship floating towards the observer. If you look at our Madras examples, you can imagine something very similar. What really were the circumstances that led to Art Deco coming into being? Any design expression of any era is always a function of the political, the social, the economic, and technological scenario in the world. And Art Deco is no different. If we cut back to 100 years ago to look at that scenario, the first few decades of the 1900s saw great changes the world over. It was the age of the machine. Industrialization and mechanization were rapidly spreading. Craftsmanship existed, but in a milieu that was overshadowed by mass production. Ornamentation was being stripped, and the elegance of simplicity was being venerated. Karl Marx proclaimed, "Man is a mere appendage to the machine." Technological innovations were innumerable. The very first elevator had been commissioned, making high rises possible. Reinforced concrete was the new material with which offered immense possibilities. Its entire potential was yet to be explored. A film adaptation of H.G. Wells' book Things to Come hit the theaters in the 30s, depicting the future of the world. At the same time, it was a tumultuous period. The world wars were raging. The Great Slump or the Great Depression led to the worst period of economic downturn. The very first motor car, Ford's Model T, was on the road. Motor wagons were beginning to replace horse drawn carriages. It was the era of great voyages in liners across the oceans. Air travel took off. Wright brothers made world news with their first flight. How was this manifest in architectural and artistic vocabulary? Cars in the fast lane, planes taking off were expressed in design, in soaring verticals, and in streamlining. Art Deco is virtually a metaphor for speed. The design philosophies of the period were multiple, each influencing the other. There was Russian constructivism, the red image on top, where functionalism was emphasized, the Distill movement, which is the Mondrian geometric grid that you can see, and Bauhaus, all of these were simultaneously influencing the language of Art Deco. The machine aesthetic celebrated components of technology. Angular style and geometric abstraction became the language of architecture. Industrial design, graphic art, fashion, theater, film, and even dance and music. I'm sure you're familiar with Fred Astaire and jazz in this period and all the films of that era. Art Deco spire of Van Allen's Chrysler Tower, the second from the left in the bottom, in New York became the symbol of Art Deco. Rockefeller Center and Empire State Building became defining statements. The red worker, that's the one in the center on top, urged society towards functionalism and efficiency. So, all of these, in a way, were stripping themselves of decoration and ornamentation, which was of the Victorian era or even the Art Nouveau preceding this period. Simultaneously came the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 by Howard Carter and inspired a craze world over for all things Egyptian. Many of the dazzling elements atop an Art Deco building would have been inspired by Egyptian motifs, especially Tutankhamun's headgear. The exhibition held in Paris in 1925, which is 100 years ago, celebrated the arrival of this new style jazz pattern of the 20s and streamlined designs. Pardon my French, but it's Exposition Internationale des Arts Décoratifs et Industriels. Art Deco is simply an abbreviated catchphrase of this long winded exhibition name. The style exploded in Rio, Buenos Aires, Florida, and many parts of Europe. The swish set in India from royalty and film industry were well traveled. They sought to be trendsetters and soon brought Art Deco to the shores of Bombay. This is a photograph of the Holkar of Indore. Ironically, simultaneously in the country, the waves of Swarajya and nationalism were spreading. So, on the one side was celebration of hand craftsmanship and the chakra and so on, whereas on the other was an exuberance of Westernism and all its influences. Madras, as I already said, has an amazing collection of Art Deco structures. The northern side of the High Court is the NSE Bose Road, which is a veritable showcase of Art Deco for the city. You can see it on the northern fringe there, east being the ocean. And then on the west, which is not visible in this photograph, is the Esplanade with yet another parade of amazing Art Deco buildings. Paris is a showcase for Madras, and it has all the elements that Art Deco would stand for, and is still a wonderful example where they use it as their office and is positioned so dramatically at the corner. And of course, it's also given rise to the name Paris Corner. And you can see the rest of NSC Bose Road, where you have the insurance companies and banks all flanking these each other there. Bombay prides itself in the Art Deco district, which fronts the Oval Maidan, where on one side are the neo Gothic buildings, and on the other side are the Art Deco buildings, which has also been, got itself a listing. But I think we're not far behind. Our Art Deco in this entire region, in this area of Madras, is really quite amazing. Um, that's the rest of it down NSC Bose Road. You can see Bombay Mutual, you can see the State Bank of Mysore, and then you have the Anderson Church, which is the only structure existing from the colonial times in this location. This is the same road viewed from the other side. You see the State Bank of Mysore and then the Bombay Mutual, and then going on to Paris Corner. The western side of the High Court is the Esplanade, where insurance companies and banks, again, are amazing structures. And this particular one is by Jackson and Barker, one of the earliest firms of Madras, which later morphed into Peterson, Prinabet and Davis, Peterson, and then Pitavdian and Partners. This was such an amazing rendering of the Art Deco. It had the vertical soaring lines in the center, the capped features, and symmetry, all of it sort of imitating a ziggurat like feel, which was another feature of Art Deco. Just like Egyptian motifs were adopted, Aztec and ziggurat motifs were adopted. One of the early structures of Madras was the Oriental Insurance Building. It was done by Chitale, who was an apprentice to Lanchester and worked on the Umaid Bhavan Palace in Jodhpur, and then was among the earliest RIBA qualified architects in the city. And you can see his Jodhpur or Rajasthani influence in the Jharoka on top. But it's a beautiful, sort of way in which it addresses the corner, very European in its styling. You can imagine this in any European city. This happily stands on Armenian Street and is a wonderful example, one of the earliest. It's also the first building to have had a basement. And those of you who may remember in the early years, Kothari lockers were in this building. And it's one of the first skyscrapers of Madras, 6 floors tall. Then you have the National Insurance Building, where the lower 2 floors were with Madras terrace roofing of the earlier period, and the upper floors, which came later, were in concrete. And so it goes on to have Art Deco features, and one can call this Indo Deco because it's not all European features in its rendering, but it has Indian elements to it. Paris, as I already mentioned, was by Baladi, Thompson, and Matthews, a firm from Calcutta, who were commissioned to do this building. And the amazing circular grills and the recessed opening for the entry are all amazing features. And if you see that little element on top, it's such a signature element of Art Deco. Apparently, it was inspired by pistons and pins. So it's technology woven into architecture. And that sketch is by the architects before the construction. Then you have the insurance building right next to it, and it has a tall opening at the entrance. So, this was one of the features that was developed in various styles. You'd only need one floor high to enter, but the entrance is exaggerated and shown 3 floors high, and the central feature is elongated and taken up, almost like the mast of a ship in a sense. And then the vertical features, the fins on the sides, the symmetry, the stepped ziggurat on top, just like the other Esplanade building, all of these were features that went on to the flowering of the style. The State Bank of Mysore was commissioned by the Mysore Maharaja, who sent the PWD engineer from Mysore to do this building, and the local architects were C.R. Narayan Rao, and yet another manifestation of the Indo-Deco. On Esplanade, you have the Raja Annamalai Mandram, which was the home of the Tamil Isai. It was a movement to popularize Tamil songs and Tamil music, and this was done in a style where some Indian elements were again incorporated, but mostly Art Deco in its styling. Again, a Chitale building. This was the university building where it was done 100 years after the Senate House. Senate House was in the mid 1800s, and this was in the mid 1900s. And Pitavdi and Partners, or Prinabit and Davis at that time, were commissioned to do this structure. You will find that there is an echoing of the buildings on the Madras University skyline. There was Senate House, there was the teaching block, which had the clock tower, which, and then there was the uh, Senate House itself, and then in the neighborhood was Chepauk Palace. All of these were renderings of the Indo-Saracenic during different periods, but they all responded to each other in their, being sympathetic to the style that was existing in the neighborhood, and they were not monuments to themselves. They were always sort of taking into account what was in the neighborhood. So here was an Art Deco building, following the idiom of the times, but rendered with sympathy to its neighbors. So you'll find the chhatri and the jaroka, the little features, but Art Deco in its rendering all the same. The University Centenary Auditorium was done by R.R. Sharma, yet another architect of that time. I don't know if you're able to read. It was, when it was opened, they said that the new university auditorium is one more symbol of our loudly proclaimed secularism. It has a pair of corbels from the temple architecture, stone screens and balconies reminiscent of our Mughal past, and the hall with its austere within is as austere as the Seventh day Adventist church. Suddenly, Art Deco becomes secular. Reserve Bank of India was yet another structure of the time, and the newspapers hailed it as a significant addition to the architectural wealth of Madras. Many of these structures during this period were done by these four firms, which stood out as leading practices. Jackson and Barker, which I already mentioned, went on to become Prinabit and Davis, and then Peterson, and then the photograph you see is of Mr. Pitavadian of Pitavadian and Partners, who was also the director of the School of Architecture in Madras. And then Mr. L.M. Chitale, who was the earliest Indian practice set up around the 30s. Jackson and Barker was little earlier, around the 20s. C.R. Narayan Rao's firm was around the 30s, and then R.R. Sharma contributed to the wealth of architecture in Madras. The other three firms exist, R.R. Sharma's alone doesn't anymore. The patrons of that period were mostly industrialists, and there was, it was the industrial era, and factories were being built, and many buildings came up during this time, both for banking and for commerce. And you will see some of the patrons are industrialists. Many of the foundation stones were laid by Nehru at that time. And you can see Mysore Maharaja in one of these. So these were the patrons of the period. Some of these architects, the four firms that I mentioned, did work and spread Art Deco around the country and went outside of Madras to other cities of Tamil Nadu like Coimbatore and Ettayapuram, where they did these bungalows. And they also went on to Kerala, where this was the Kerala University Senate House, and then the Ram Mohan Palace in Cochin, and the one on the right side top is the Reserve Bank of Nagpur, all contributed by architects from Madras. This was a drawing of that period. You can see the chhatris and the verticality. Many institutions adopted this style. CLRI, the Central Leather Research Institute, adopted this style. AC College of Technology. You will see that the porch here is again exaggerated. For a car to park or for a human being to enter, one floor height of a porch would actually be enough. But here they've sort of raised it to a couple of floors in an exaggerated verticality just to emphasize the style. And you will see that the bands on the sides of the porch also sort of emphasize that verticality. And another feature that came up at this time was the corner window. Because of technology permitting it, the corner was freed of a column that would otherwise have been there. The pillars were again stylized with some motifs from the local elements. Pachepa's College, which came up in 1938, is yet another example. I think many of us who went to schools and colleges here around this period, maybe in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and some of them still exist, of course, would have gone to schools and colleges which are all Art Deco. Some of us may have realized it, some not, but they're all Art Deco buildings. Curzon's was a different take on the Art Deco. It was a little earlier than many of those buildings. You can see that there is a rosette pattern which was very Indo-Saracenic. So it's sort of fighting shy and leaving Indo-Saracenic behind and sort of tentatively adopting Art Deco. It's a very different rendering of the style. Mount Road had its several great examples. This was Speedway, which is an amazing Art Deco structure. Very, very simple, but very stylistic. The Kasturi buildings of the Hindu is very well looked after and is one of the best examples. Again, by Jackson and Barker, you can see the stepping up from the side, the abstraction of the ziggurat, the central feature raised up, the cantilevered porch, and many of the features of, the fenestrations taking on verticality. Simpsons is yet another beautiful example of Art Deco, where a longish facade to break the monotony has been broken up into a straight part at the end, and then a curved feature, and then the central feature having vertical fins to break the fenestration, and then again the curved portion, and then going on to the end. And one of the portions in the rear has this flag atop the very tall staircase expressed as it is, and which sort of reminds me of ships of that era. And then you have the trapezoidal element, you have portholes which come from ocean liners. All of these features sort of put together to make its own rendering. Many factories of this period adopted this style. There was a burst of industrialization, as we saw in the previous visual with all the patrons. So, here were factories which were exploring corner windows. India Pistons has those vertical elements in the porch, again exaggerated beyond what is needed. Even little structures like watchmen's kiosks had features which freed the corner, and then there were several other trapezoidal elements, etc., which found new expression. Lucas TVS is a gem, a little gem, just one floor high, but so beautifully rendered and again well looked after. It has the element of technology in that little pin like element which was there in the Paris. And then you have Tutankhamun's headgear in the on top of the parapet. So all these different features, metal grills, etc., which came in during that time. The rendering around the city is varied. Each structure adopted its own format of how to mix and match the straight portions with the curved portions, the tall portions, the fins, all of these. So the examples are many, and happily, many are still standing. Bharat Insurance, the one in front, is the Art Deco rendering. Again, a beautiful way of addressing the corner. While the Oriental Insurance building, had a concave surface to address the corner, this was a convex surface, which beautifully brought the element into the vision of the observer. The more famous neighbor, Bharat Insurance of the Indo-Saracenic, is right behind this. And you will see that there's a balcony at the mid-level of this structure, but giving a floating effect. It is not touching those pillars which are freestanding and therefore giving that soaring effect of going up to the 2 or 3 floor height without touching that mid level balcony. So the detailing really is amazing at this period. Connemara was an icon of the times where royalty and famous people stayed, Queen Elizabeth included. And the facade, despite many alterations and changes that different renovations have brought to the hotel, have still, many of the important features have remained. The main facade remains of the gentle curve. The staircase, the grand staircase remains. So many of the features you can still see, and the interiors were absolutely stunning. The ceiling was detailed to house the lights and fans, and the furniture, of course, has been changed now, but many of the features were absolutely amazing. Yet another iconic hotel, which unfortunately we've lost, is the Dasa Prakash. It had a very large plot, but a very small frontage, and it was very cleverly detailed at a slight angle to make it seem larger than the frontage actually was. Here, the circular window, the porthole, borrowed from the imagery of ships, and elongated oval for the central feature was something very, very unique. There isn't another structure with those elements. You have the projecting balconies, the curved facades. When we last photographed this, there was a sign there saying, "One landmark will soon replace another." I don't know about the new landmark, but we've lost an absolutely amazing structure. However, it's been captured on celluloid in several of the Tamil films of that era. I think there were terrace parties where, in the black and white era, you'd see many films in Dasa Prakash. And Guru, the later film, I think somewhere in the mid 2000s, captures it where, that circular window at the right side bottom image is where Dhirubhai Ambani meets Goenka of Indian Express in that very room, which is that circular window, which is the pride of that structure. While it's been captured on celluloid, unfortunately, we've really lost this, like some of the smaller buildings that we've lost as well. I think people will also remember the tiffin and the masal dosa of Das Prakash as much as the structure. Another amazing structure was the Cancer Institute, rendered absolutely in Art Deco styling, especially the joinery with those mullions. The mullions was the reason for those mullions was the size of glass available at that time. They were all small panes, unlike today's glass structures, which are 2 floors high, etc. And in the case of Cancer Institute, it not only echoed features of Art Deco, but it also echoed the simplicity of the institution. Alliance Francaise was a burst of mosaic and colors, twin columns rendered in mosaic again, and a very beautiful structure. The feature of the stepped ziggurat and the trapezoidal window was a clever feature to not only express the styling but to also give protection from sun and rain. Nothing echoed Art Deco better than the cinemas of the time. The movie theaters of the period were a sheer celebration of all the fantasy that one could imagine of that time. When Casino was inaugurated in 1941, it was said, open quotes, modernity and American streamlined ideas ruled the general conception and principle of construction of casino, close quotes. That they even perceived the word streamline and used it in that era to me is really amazing. Its simplicity is its ornamentation, and its naturalness, its majesty, said the film magazine of the period, The Torch. Most elegant, comfortable picture palace. The graceful foyer, the double staircase, the stage, and the proscenium. The beautiful auditorium typifies the luxury and refinement of this modern picture place. Gliding curves, a wide staircase, and smart windows. These were all quotes of that period for Casino. The owners said, "We are informed that the idea embodying the boat, the auditorium, introduced for the first time in India, was entirely his own," meaning the architect, "to have exhibited so much of a mature wisdom and practical knowledge in so young an age. He is really an engineering genius with very great promising future." That's what was said of Firoz Irani, the Parsi architect. The first film to be screened here was a British comedy. It's Turned Out Nice Again, was the name of the film. Casino was dubbed Fairyland of the Screen South, an announcement extraordinary for its inauguration. It obviously created quite a stir. Those were some of the articles on the casino, and that's the architect. So, this is also the era when architects get recognized. The period before that would have been, mostly engineers, masons. There were hardly anybody who was named except for Robert Chisholm and Henry Irwin, who did the landmark structures, and they were all architects employed by the presidency. Otherwise, architects were pretty much not named or known in many of the structures. This was the era when that comes into being. Kamadhenu was another fantastic expression, and you'll see all the technological elements. The three rings on top, while the Olympic rings was one of the elements being used in Art Deco, some people say it's like a question mark, some people say it is rings or hooks. Whatever be it, it's somebody's imagination gone a bit wild. And again, the stepped feature you can see in the right top, it sort of steps up from the sides symmetrically to go up to the crescendo on top. The corner feature was another thing that was addressed, and many of these buildings have such semicircular sunshades which acquired the nickname eyebrows. On the left bottom of the screen was, you'd see the C brackets of the porch. Here was cantilevered portico. Normally, you would have seen a portico with four pillars, and here was, the freedom of expression that concrete gave. So you have the C brackets, which was sort of like a fantasy, leading you into the world of fantasy that was awaiting you in the film that you would watch later. Emma Theatre is in Tambaram, and when we first saw it, it was sort of a little dilapidated, and we were not sure whether it's going to last. But the next time we saw it, it was all painted up and spruced up. So I think there's hope for these structures. There are many renderings of the theatres around the city, while the Rex, the Ritz, the Roxy, and Regal, and so on exist, which are all typical theatre names. There's also the Janata, the Padmanabha, the Srinivasa, and all of these, which also exist and take you to the world of filmdom. The lettering or the typeface of that period was something uh, which was really very, very striking. It made a mark, and many of those typefaces are still used today. Angular, stark, thick and thin letters, all of these were used in many of these. And the theatres went on not only to Madras, but to the rest of Tamil Nadu as well. Like here, you'll see Nataraja talkies of Karaikudi and Chittaranjan talkies of Shivaganga. So, all of these different cities of Tamil Nadu adopted the style as well. You will see the thick and thin lettering also going on into Tamil, where Shri Charsobis is written in Tamil. This is a building in Georgetown, the Daga House. which is really quite striking and one of my personal favorites. It In Georgetown, you obviously have the shop house format. You have the shop in the lower level and you live above. So you have the balconies, which are, curved. In this case, it's just projected a bit with curved corners, very, very stylized, and the joinery with sharp elements and all of the detailing of Art Deco. You have in Georgetown several buildings that had adopted Art Deco but had mythological elements. They had, Indian names, they had Indian features married into what was a Western style. The sunburst is a very typical motif of that period. You'll see on top, on the in the center top, the rings which perhaps held a flag post at one time. Garden houses of South Madras adopted the style. This is the house of uh, President S. Radhakrishnan on Edward Elliott's Road, which is, of course, now Radhakrishnan Salai. And it's a very gracious building done by Mr. Chitale. And Chitale had been commissioned by President Radhakrishnan to do several structures around the country. And then they became very close friends. And later, he commissioned Mr. Chitale to do his home. And this is the beautiful result of the garden house. Yet another garden house in South Madras. You have that beautiful detailing of industrial elements on the gate pillars and the Art Deco light fixture, the balconies with perforations where the straights are married with the curves, the projecting sunshade, the projecting balcony, all of which are Art Deco. Again, the rendering was adopted in the city in various areas, especially in the City Improvement Trust areas, the CIT colonies as we know it, near Alvarpet, that is near Mylapore. There's one CIT colony, and then in Gandhinagar, you had the City Improvement Trust, and some homes in T Nagar and Saidapet. All of these were the sort of exuberant expression of Art Deco. The building on the left top, I just wanted to specifically explain the window formatting. This was sort of mathematically, you can express it as x, 2x, and x. So the center portion was, twice the size of the flanking features, and that was very, very typical of this period. It was used in commercial buildings, in homes, and it's amazing to think most of these buildings would have been done by masons or masons. How they picked up the language of the times and how they imbibed it from maybe the landmark structures, maybe some other structures they worked on with some, known architects, but how they adapted it to structures. It was really a people's movement. Short lived though it may have been, it was really something that everybody sort of welcomed it so happily. From the cement floors and the red oxide floors of the previous era, you go on to bursts of color with mosaic coming in. And these buildings, some of them were prosaic and plain, where you had, single colored mosaic, sometimes with a border, sometimes with a skirting. I think many of you will emote with those. But there were patterns and, sort of designs that one never imagined, which took over many of these buildings. This was yet another wonderful example with sort of a snaking pattern going up, the verticality expressed differently, a very bold circular feature with the eyebrow running on the straight part and on the curved part. The little balls between the horizontal elements were all elements which sort of were copied from mechanization and machines. Grills became typical of this era. This house belonged to C.R. Narayan Rao. You can see the cantilevered porch. You can see the circular veranda with grills. And one interesting feature of this time is just above the parapet of the veranda, you'll find just another element just slightly raised above that to give that floating effect. And then the eyebrow, the typical feature again. Some of the designs inside the house, the roof patterns were rendered so beautifully. It was not just left plain to be painted white. It had the folded pleat design on the roof. The mosaic staircase had mosaic railings and parapets, and the Arakadavu, which many of you may be familiar, later only lasted, I think, in the barber shops, which the cantilevered porch, again, a myriad expressions, each one to their own. The balcony detailing, you had cement motifs, and again, it was because concrete lent itself and was these structures were possible because of that. Compound walls was another element where the partition between different panels were treated so differently. There were punctures in the middle, there were solids with dividing elements, all of these, and then the sunburst, of course, kept recurring. This one at the right bottom was just wheels. Again, you'll see the corner window, how it's expressed here with wooden windows, which is typical of the previous era, but many were in glass. Bands and sort of pilasters were also features of this period. The crowning elements were treated specially. Many of them did not have a function, but they were to say, this is my style. Again, fancy grills. That one in the middle, especially, is somebody's imagination with, C brackets flanking the main door. And then the one on the right side is a sort of an expression of the frozen fountain, which finds better expression in Bombay and in other places. I didn't find too many in Madras, but here's a semblance of the frozen fountain. Metal jalis, staircases which were rendered very, very differently, newel posts and railings and balustrades, detailed ever so beautifully. Glass block was another sort of um, element that was used in this period. Not only here, you will find a lot of it in London and other places. Glass block was used especially in staircase areas where verticality could be expressed, and it brought in light as well as made it a special feature. Olympic rings, as I already mentioned, in different forms. Olympics may have 5 rings, but here we have 2, we have 3, we have 5, we have several, and some buildings even had multiple variations of it. The floors of this period, again, as I mentioned, mosaic, were absolutely fantastic, gleaming even today. You had the typical checkerboard pattern. You'd have black and gray, you'd have black and white, you'd have gray and white, and here is a maroon and off white. And then you had the cube, which was three-dimensional in its varying forms, the terracotta, the greens, the ochres, all the earthy colors, and they they were specially used in verandas, they were used in corridors, they were used in staircases, and then in rooms, they usually were plain with borders and skirtings. But here was one house we found in T Nagar where, they had arrows, they had squares, they had diamonds, they had everything, and this pattern actually ran diagonally across the room from. And I don't know how they would have used the room or the furniture, but this is how they'd expressed it. And when it got to the staircase, it was a little simpler. That was in the same house. And the left bottom was another house where all of these colored mosaics had been used in the different rooms in the house. And I don't think it's only today that we use leftover material in either, in the rear buildings or in the porch. Here they've used it very creatively and made a pattern out of it. And the one on the right is again another sort of a bold pattern of mosaic. And you can see that, the color runs into the ceiling as well. Today we just sort of hang a fan on the ceiling and it's just there. But how beautifully they've sort of acknowledged the presence of that. Moldings on the ceiling, cornices were all features of this time. Toilets were not far behind in the design elements of the Art Deco. First of all, the sanitary ware was so stylized in the Art Deco period. Twyfords, shanks, some of those that some of you who have older homes will recognize. And then there were glass block partitions. There were vitreous glass on the walls, like the second from the left. That's an entire glass on the walls of the toilet. And then also mosaic was used in the toilets. And there's such a coming back of, revival of the style now. The ones in the right bottom that I'm showing you are all fixtures that are now being manufactured by suppliers. And I think after The Great Gatsby and our own tall icon Amitabh Bachchan featuring in that, Art Deco's made a big comeback, and many of this is very, very popular now. Art Deco found expression in furniture. You'll find that, the arm of that sofa, why it had to be cantilevered, one doesn't know, but it just borrowed from the architectural elements. You can see that in the desk above. They wanted that freedom of expression. It was not the old desk, it was shelves that were cantilevered. There were partitions between rooms that had that little, detailing on top, which was machine oriented. Many of these features you'll find the circle, the elements here, and built in wardrobes were coming in for the first time. Hardware of this period is absolutely fascinating. You'll imagine some of those in maybe in ships, maybe in industries, maybe in machines. Some of them were bejeweled and made a little special, but some of them were very plain and simple, but all of them very stylish. Light fittings and fixtures of this period were absolutely wonderful. The one at the bottom in the center is that of Connemara, and many of them remain. These fixtures of that era many of them were German or European, very hard to replace. If you have one at home, you can be searching for a broken replacement, and it's very hard to find. Many miscellaneous structures adopted this. This particular one was the one on the left was a tall feature. It was above RR Pharmacy when it was there next to the Pulayar Kovil. One really doesn't know the purpose of this, except I used to think maybe it was to rival Kamadhenu Theatre, which was next door. Otherwise, I couldn't see any purpose for it. And many of the EB structures in the city, the electricity board structures, are little gems of Art Deco, and many of them are still there. Of course, painted differently, but many of them are very elegant structures. The clock tower in town is a stylized Art Deco. All the sides, the corners, were features which were elongated, buttressed in the corner as if supported on the side. The Roypeta Clock Tower, which is near Express Mall, again Art Deco. One of the churches in the Nandambakam area, the cemetery in it's somewhere between Gindi and Ramapuram. It's a beautifully maintained cemetery. It says 1939 to 45, so it's the soldiers of the Second World War. But I hear that there are some of the First World War as well in this cemetery. It's really beautifully maintained. This is the commemorative pillar in the center of the war memorial. Absolutely Art Deco in its rendering. The little chhatri on top, again like the university buildings near where it is. The drive down the marina is made that much more special. It's a sober structure for the remembrance of the people who sacrificed their lives in the war. The projecting sunshade, the severe appearance, the plain, non ornamented feel, all of it perfectly suited to the purpose as well. Sometimes we do some very horrible things to Art Deco, and this one was covered with aluco panel. Sometimes people think aluco panel is a solution for anything to be dressed up. Unfortunately, this has also been done only halfway down, and I've not really got to the bottom of it, but I think it is because only that one side was rented out to a particular person, and they just did that half. The top features, however, because they're not visible from the road, survived that dressing up. But sometimes we do the right things too. This structure, Speedway, has been beautifully restored and is functioning as an office. All the original elements as they are. You will see that the signages are left separate from the Art Deco pillars, which have been expressed in totality. Because if the signages were to touch them, the originality of the pillars would go. So it gives a little floating effect separated from the pillars. So also the air conditioning ducts do not touch the pillars. And while modern interventions are required for some of these older buildings, whether you put in a lift or whether you put in air conditioning or you add toilets, you do it with respect for this original structure. Many Art Deco homes are beautifully lived in. Here's one such example, the staircase with its lovely mosaic and that central line sort of leading you up as you climb, and the corner with the curve and the fenestrations. Very interesting. The way the corner window in that lower right visual brings in a flood of light, and all of these just go to show that many of these buildings, if looked after, can well be utilized, both whether it is for offices, whether it is for stores like in this one, or whether it is homes like in that previous one. This one is a structure on Woods Road, which Ilford House, which has been converted to a Fab India store. So the wealth that we have in the city, I think first of all, to celebrate 100 years, we must realize the wealth that we have. Many of these structures should be looked after and sort of let their lives go longer, and hopefully let them be a sample of what our architectural journey in the city was. It would be lovely if we can keep these as a mark of the one step in the architectural journey for future generations to see. Thank you.
Yeah, very beautiful presentation, ma'am. Very insightful. How does this art deco compare with the architecture that we see in Pondicherry, which is typically a French architecture? How does it compare with that?
Pondicherry also has Art Deco, but what you find in the White Town, so to say,
Yes.
is mostly originally French, originally French, and then some of it is like every city, there's all of these different elements that coexist. So there is plenty of Art Deco there as well, not restricted only to the White Town. It's there in what was called the Black Town as well.
Is there any protection for these buildings? Does the city?
These are not protected much as they should be, and there is a heritage list which was made some years ago, and many of the Indo-Saracenic structures, etc., are listed. A few of these are listed, but really we need to protect them, and the laws are not yet in place for this much, as we've been asking for it for at least 3 decades now.
I understand in Mumbai that many of the buildings are protected in
Yeah.
old Mumbai, so it can
In
be done.
Mumbai, the Art Deco itself has been declared UNESCO listed heritage. So that itself gives protection. And basically, it is up to each owner. If you realize the value, then you look after it. And multiple owners owning one particular structure is sometimes the problem, because if one sibling or one stakeholder is able to buy over the rest of them, then it lasts. If there are too many stakeholders and they only wish to cash out, that is a problem. Land values having increased, that is something that has created this issue. But having said that, many Art Deco structures, especially because it's simpler and easier to restore them, they have been restored and they've been put to good use. So that is a good sign. And I think if there is awareness, which is what we try to do, if there's awareness and if people feel pride in their own structure, I think that's half the battle won. Many times they don't realize what they have.
So I have one suggestion, one question. The suggestion is these Gothic buildings of Mumbai and all are very well documented as a book, but in Chennai, we don't have so much of documentation, at least on this building, that INTACH I think should take over. And do we take? My question is, do we take any steps in getting it recognized with so much of Art Deco and buildings and Indo-Saracenic architectures around? So do we take steps in Chennai to take it getting converted as an UNESCO World Heritage Site or so?
We have been documenting several structures. We have over 600 structures documented, and it's an ongoing process. We partner with some of the schools of architecture because we need manpower to do this, and several have come forward, and we are documenting several structures. But in terms of your suggestion about Art Deco, we are looking into it and we will do this.
For the UNESCO World Heritage Site conversion, madam, like
That is a long process. There are several, wait lists on that. We will there are several structures in Madras which deserve it, and it requires to go through an application process which is very elaborate, and there are some on the wait list. We will know when it comes through.
Can you give some information on the Madras Medical College building and the railway administrative building opposite that? Both are of the same era.
Are you talking about what's called the Red Fort?
No, I'm talking about the one next to the central station, which is the
The
administrative building.
government hospital?
No, the Southern Railway administrative building, which is also of the Art Deco era.
You're talking about the Southern Railway headquarters?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that was again in stone, which is very different from our other brick buildings. Is this on? Yeah. If you see most of our buildings, they're all red brick in that era, and that typifies the image of Madras as being red brick Indo-Saracenic. That's the typical image you carry away. This particular building is again influenced by the Mysore structures which Vishweshwaraya did in Bangalore, etc. So they've done it in stone. It is a marvelous building. It is sort of tending to Art Deco, not exactly so.
And the one opposite that, you have the new Madras Medical College building, which is also of the Art Deco era, right? 1935.
That has now been modified.
No, I'm talking about the one of 1935 buildings, which was made as part of the entire centenary. The whole lot, the two huge blocks.
Yeah, that is an older building.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be Art Deco. Sorry? I'm
Yeah,
not
that's
able
right,
to
yeah.
hear you. Okay. Yeah.
And you have the Catholic Center also, which comes in Georgetown. That is also part of the Art
This
Deco.
by no means is, showing you every building in Madras. It's just a sampling of the different structures. Glad to know that you've noted a few more.
And anything special on the Catholic Center building? Because that also has those domes, the entire chhatris over there.
There are different variations. Some of the domes come from the colonial era, and the chhatris come from adapting Indo-Saracenic. So there's no, like in mathematics, you can say 1 + 1 is equal to 2. In architecture, it's not like that. If anything, it's 1 + 1 is equal to 3. So it's just what you do. You have all of this from whatever you've seen, whatever you've learned, whatever you're imbibing. And today there's so much communication and information overload. So what is produced, there's nothing which you can say is purely this. It's all different variations of, maybe it can fall in a certain category. That's about it.
Sujatha, I have a question. The IG office on the beach,
Yeah.
which I understand was originally built to be a Freemason temple,
Yeah, Masonic Lodge.
Masonic Lodge. So, is it a protected monument, or because it was once threatened to be demolished? So,
So that's
is it now
one of
protected?
our highlight successes in the
Fantastic.
heritage movement. It was to be brought down, and 13-storied structure was to come in its place.
Exactly, yeah.
So we ran a signature campaign which brought in signatures from, poets, writers, industrialists, thinkers, whatever, and also the Verkadle vendor, the Shundal vendor, the walkers on the beach, etc. It was across a cross section.
And also the Queen Mary's College is a
Queen
success
Mary's
story.
College also. So not only was it retained, and they also made a copy of that next door, and both the structures are lit up.
Yeah,
And today, if you drive down the
it's
beach
beautiful.
road, it's quite a
Quite a
sight.
sight, yeah. Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I just wanted to ask you about the architecture today and how much has the influence, like the Art Deco motives, I'm sure they have really, really reduced as far as influence while designing building go. But could you throw some light on the relationship between Art Deco and the architecture today, and a little more on what era are we in as far as architecture is concerned now?
Basically, Art Deco itself sort of waned off in the mid 50s in the West, even earlier, around the 40s. In India, it's sort of 50s and even some early 60s, you'll see Art Deco buildings. That's because it came in late and practice, they started realizing what it is, etc. But in the 60s, the international movement came in, which was, your simple grid. And your LIC building is an icon of that, of the international style. So once that came in, Art Deco was phased out. It was not, it did not continue. The international style took over, and it was also cost effective, although many people say it lacked a soul. So you have buildings which are just divided up into grids. You have the vertical, the horizontal, and you don't need much imagination to do a structure like that. But there are wonderful sort of variations of that, which are icons as well. So, not only here, New York is full of those structures, London is full of those structures, Madras, of course, has its own structures. So, this is what was phased out. In terms of Art Deco today, it is not the idiom of the times. What is today is, after that you've had postmodernism, you've had the various isms and whatever. And today you do sustainable architecture, you're coming back to, having your natural light and air and local materials. That's one side of it. There's another side of it which just takes technology to the ultimate. So there are various expressions depending on the scale and scope of the project and the person doing it and their sensibilities. So all of these matter. But what I'm seeing of late of Art Deco is, there it's like a revivalist styling. I'm seeing a lot of that in objects, in interiors. Like the old Chola renovated, I find, has a lot of those elements now. But I wouldn't say it is, it's a movement that's come back. It's there in phases and parts.
Like maybe influences from the past.
It's a retro revival
Right.
in parts. It's like in textiles and clothes, you have, that sort of a revival. It's exactly like that.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We're exactly on time. 7:30 we promised and we've ended on time. Thank you so much for that. For many of us, it was a trip down memory lane. Very nostalgic. We've lived in such houses, we've seen such theaters, and we really mourn the passing of that era. But I suppose we move on, and the old replaces the new. Thank you for taking us down that lane, and I'm sure we'll have you back with many more such interesting events. So please do attend our next few events. We have on 19th of August, Navigating Global Disruptions. We have Ambassador Rakesh Sood and Ambassador Tirumurthy, along with a very reputed defense analyst who's joining us for this. On 27th of August, we have the former Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. T.S. Krishnamurthy, with his book Beyond the Ballot. So we hope you'll attend those events also as enthusiastically as you have done today. So thank you very much, as we said, for coming here on a festival day. And thanks a lot, Sujatha, for once again coming
Thank you.
to our platform, and we hope to invite you for more such occasions. Thank you.
I just also want to just say a big thanks to all the people who allowed me into their homes to take these photographs, and Srinag, who did the photography, is here. So thank you, Srinag, for being here. Thanks a lot.